Welcome to the Warfare Parenting Podcast. I'm Laine Lawson Craft, here to walk with you through the ups and downs of parenting prodigals. In every episode, we're going to get real about the struggles, sharing stories of hope, and learning how faith can turn things around. So let's dive in and discover the path to healing and hope together. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Warfare Parenting Podcast. I'm Laine Lawson Craft, and I'm so glad you are here. I have an amazing, I guess it would be series that we're going to do for the next 4 to 5 weeks, and I'm so excited. It is with a friend of mine and an author. Hello, Nancy Landrum. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you, Laine.
Well, Nancy, there's a commitment I have, and that is I have people on that have experienced what we're discussing. I want somebody that has been through the fire or found a way to do something differently. And so I am so excited. First and foremost, this first episode is really all about you and why you wrote the book. Here it is, Pungent Boundaries. I mean, just the title alone, Nancy, drew me in. As you know, I was a mother of 3 prodigals at one time, and boundaries seemed impossible. And I love the way your book walks us through and how to define codependency and how to be successful. And so really, let's just start with you, Nancy. You have been through a lot of death and dreams shattered. And let's start with your marriage, your first marriage.
Well, I was not very happy in the house I grew up in and determined to leave as soon as I could. My number one goal was to have a happy, loving marriage, which I perceived as better than my parents had done. So I married young, fortunately, a very fine man. We had 2 baby boys. Stephen was our first, and Peter came 18 months later. And then just about, it was when Steve was just a little over 2 years old. My husband left home to play softball with the church team one night and dropped dead of an undiagnosed aortic aneurysm that we didn't know he had. Stephen was very emotionally attached to his dad and probably more connected with his dad than he was with me. And the highlight of his evening, every evening, was hearing his dad's truck pull in the driveway. And how do you explain death to a 2-year-old?
You can.
Not possible. So one of our neighbors had a pickup truck like my husband had, and whenever he drove by, Stephen would run to the front door yelling, "Daddy, Daddy," hoping finally Daddy was coming home. It deeply affected him even as a toddler. He went from a vocabulary of maybe 200 words down to 10 or 12 words. He was almost potty trained. That went out the window for another year. When he colored, he would only color in black and purple. He had all the symptoms of deep depression, but looking for a therapist for a 2-year-old was so far outside of my awareness. This was in the 60s, and I don't even know if there were child psychologists at that time. I knew he was troubled. I didn't know what to do about it, except to just keep loving him, being there for him, reassuring him, but it never really went away. As he was growing up, every once in a while, we would have a conversation where he would very vulnerably tell me what was going on inside, and it was like there was this deep, empty pit inside of him that just continued to be painful. And again, we hear this phrase, children are resilient. Maybe in many cases they are, but not always.
Right.
And Stephen didn't know how to pull himself out of that pit.
And let's not forget, Nancy, you've just lost your husband that went
Yes,
off to a softball game and didn't come home. So,
right.
I mean, tragedy, trauma. I mean, you had it all. And who could assess and have the capacity to handle all of that all at one time? So
It was
there,
all I could do to stay alive. I
yeah,
wanted to.
right, right. Well, that years went by and you tried marriage again, too. Let's talk about
Yes.
that.
I was a single mom for 13 years after the death of my first husband. And a mutual friend introduced Jim Landrum and I. And we dated for about, I think it was only maybe 6 months. But it didn't take, he was a widower as well, had 3 children. And we married and, thought we were mature and we'd been through a lot. We could handle anything. But the very unique challenges of step family dynamics just threw us a big curve. So we went through a few years of extreme difficulty, had very different ideas about how to parent our children, and we ended up fighting a lot until it finally got bad enough we started looking for help, and fortunately found a coach that began to teach us some simple, respectful ways of communicating, whereas the more frustrated we got, the worse our communication methods became. So we were able to get our marriage on track and enjoyed 17 more years together before he passed away from cancer. But while my marriage was falling apart, Stephen was getting into a lot of trouble. It's like all the hurt and anger that had been bottled up inside of him exploded with adolescence. He became mouthy with teachers. He was in trouble with school. He got kicked out of 4 high schools. I got woken up one night at 2:00 in the morning by the cops telling me that they'd arrested him, and I thought he was in bed asleep. So the journey of, well, first of all, during that period of time, I just felt hopeless. I felt like everything in my life that I valued was falling apart, including me. I was falling apart.
Yes. And what I want everyone to know as we go further into more episodes in this series, I wanted everyone to see that there are many facets to your experience and your wisdom. I mean, this is something you battled with. As you said, Stephen was 2.5, all the way up through his adult years. And so you have been through it. You've been through the fire, and your passion, your why is so powerful. Why did you write Pungent Boundaries?
Great question, Laine. I believe I wrote it mostly because my coaching practice had revealed so many of my clients needing the skill of setting boundaries for themselves, for their children. And I would tell bits and pieces of my story to my clients, and finally just sat down and put it all in a book that I could recommend to them. And somehow, after Stephen's death, which we'll get to eventually, I knew that story of my journey with him and how valuable he was as a teacher to me. I'm not sure I ever would have learned the practice of setting healthy boundaries if it hadn't been for Stephen pushing my buttons.
Yeah.
He was I want to say, first of all, there were so many ways that he was delightful. I have thousands of really great memories with him. But the challenges that he faced pushed my buttons, and I thought that somehow my children had to be well behaved and look good in order to prove that I was a good mother. And Stephen just blew that image to smithereens.
Yes. Yes. I've been there too. Nancy, I've been there too. And so many of our viewers and listeners are in the battle right now with their children, whether they're teens or grown adult children, where they are in a war against codependency and not having healthy and successful boundaries and all of that. So we both get it. But what's so powerful to me is that you took all of this pain and made a purpose and wrote it down in this book. And as we go through this series, you are just going to learn so much, viewers and audience, because we're going to figure out what is codependency, what are rules, and what are boundaries, and all of that. Nancy, I have here, I love this. I say that we are building your story around this book because you have such great empathy and knowledge for parents facing the challenges of setting loving and successful boundaries when raising children today. And so in our second episode, we're going to talk about understanding the pungent boundaries in parenting. Is there anything else you'd like to say as we wrap up, just delving into a part of your story and why you wrote the book?
At a younger age, I was quite judgmental about parents that had troubled kids that were out of control. I thought it was automatically a problem with their parenting, or somehow it was the parents' fault. And Stephen managed to wipe out my ability to be judgmental toward any parent with any child. That's a gift that he gave me. It's that I have so much more empathy for parents who are struggling with the whole concept of parenting, how to be a good parent. We don't get kids with a manual, telling us what to do or how to handle various situations. So I'm grateful to Stephen for wiping out my tendency to be judgmental toward parents who have troubled children.
Well, and also he helped break away the shame that many of us as parents have when my kids are getting arrested, flipping their cars drunk. Back in the day, I felt such shame, like I'm a terrible parent, Nancy. I felt like all of this is my fault. And it took a long time to realize that they were making choices. We can get into that later, but see, that's another reason that this is going to be a powerful series, because we need to break that shame off of parents, because it's just not a good emotion to have when you're in the battle, right?
Shame keeps us trapped in a cycle that is useless. It prevents us from making healthy decisions. So accepting that my child is an individual with the ability to make his own choices apart from me, aside from whatever I may have taught him, was one of the first steps out of being trapped by shame.
Wow. This is going to be powerful. Nancy, thank you for your courage and your bravery to share all of this with us. Very intimate stories of Stephen and all that you've been through. And thank you again for writing the book, Pungent Boundaries. Real quickly, where can people find the book before we end?
2 places. If you go to my website, nancylandrum.com, you can order it from there, or you can go straight to Amazon and get either the paperback or the audio version of Pungent Boundaries.
Wonderful. And you've got a lot of other books that are so helpful. Okay. So everybody get ready to enjoy and learn and be encouraged and inspired in the following series with Nancy. Thank you again, Nancy, for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on the Warfare Parenting Podcast. I hope you're leaving with a heart full of hope and some spiritual strategies to help your wayward child and bring your prodigal home. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and with God, everything can change. I invite you to the many free resources at LaineLawsonCraft.com. Don't forget to read the free chapter, the first chapter of my newest book, The Parent's Battle Plan, and sign up for weekly encouraging emails too. Stay in touch on social media and don't forget to subscribe. I'm Laine Lawson Craft, reminding you with love and faith, no thing is too hard or big for our God. See you next time.